Good morning. Welcome to a presentation for Dr. Rosemary Tyrrell's Conference on Teaching and Learning. My name is Kendrick Davis, and I'd like to introduce Dr. Ajwa Osei as one of the key leaders in this endeavor to please share the name of the topic we're discussing and then introduce the team members.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ajwa Osei. I'm a pediatrician with UCR Health and also a medical educator with UCR School of Medicine. Today, the group has gathered to, have a discussion and share our stories on an endeavor that we introduced into the UCR School of Medicine, health equity, social justice, and anti-racism curricular thread. This particular endeavor was entitled Community and Conversation, Empowering Health Equity, Social Justice, and Anti-Racism Efforts through Student Community Intersectional Dialogues. The team you see here were very pivotal in carrying out this endeavor. And so I'm going to pass the baton on to Dr. Carlos Cortez and have him introduce himself as well.
Hello, I'm Carlos Cortez. With Ajwa, I'm co-director of what we call HESJAR, that's Health Equity, Social Justice, and Anti-Racism Curriculum.
Excellent. Drs. Osei and Dr. Cortez. Michelle, would you please introduce yourself as well? And this is just going by what I see on my screen.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Burrows, and I'm the Director for Community Engagement and Outreach for our School of Medicine and Center for Healthy Communities.
Thank you so much. Dr. Ruidas.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nina Redas. I'm the behavioral scientist at the UCR Family Medicine Residency Program.
Thank you. And Hannah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hannah Abdirahman. I'm a second-year medical student here at UCR School of Medicine.
And as mentioned before, I'm Kendrick Davis. I'm the Associate Dean for Assessment and Evaluation and the Vice Chair for Research. So I'd like to start this dialogue by asking this beautiful team, as you introduce this wonderful thread, please tell us what you were doing and why. So how did this come about? And feel free to take time to answer. And then if you hear an answer that you'd like to add on to, by all means, jump in and share your perspective.
Ajwa, why don't you take the lead?
Sure. So about a year and a half ago, Dr. Cortez, right? It's been about a year and a half now.
July of last year, not 2020. Yeah.
Yes. The School of Medicine appointed Dr. Cortez and myself to lead this new curricular initiative, focusing on health equity, social justice, and anti-racism. And really, that's all we had, nothing else. So with a series of meetings between Dr. Cortez and myself, we realized that, you know what, before we start doing anything, we really need to hear from our community members. What would they like to see in this thread? How would they like this to be? How would they like this to work out? In addition to our community members, we also need to hear from our students, our faculty, and our staff. And so we started a series of focused listening sessions with our students, our staff, and our faculty members. And it became very apparent and very clear that everybody wanted to know what the community wanted this to be like. And so that gave us this brilliant idea of actually having conversations with our community members to hear their perspectives about how they see the healthcare system, how they interact with the healthcare system. And that's how we started this initiative. But one key point was we did not want to build this curriculum from top down, right? So our students are pivotal. I mean, they're the next generation of physicians. And so Dr. Cortez and I decided that if we're going to do this, our students were going to be very involved and lead this initiative, this process. And so that's how we have this student community conversation series that we launched.
And that's a beautiful introduction. And what I want to do is, because you're already addressing now part of the how. When we talk about what you're doing and why we're doing this. So what I want to get into specifically are the titles of the actual thread. So as an example, you have health equity. Can we break down each of those components, both the health equity, the social justice, and the anti-racism? What it is that you intend to mean by that, and what it is that we intend to do with the students with it.
Well, yeah, that's a good question, Kendrick. And let me make it simple from my end, and then Ajwa can add to it, and anyone else. for health equity, it's in, and when it stopped one under the thing, we also took a look at other medical schools to see what they were doing in this. And as far as we could find, we're the only medical school around that is triangulating these three ideas and putting them together. They tend to be separate threads at other places. So what we did for health equity, I think there's a couple of issues here. One, how do we have excellent medicine that is also equitable? In other words, build the idea of equity into excellence, that you can't have excellent medicine if there are communities and people who are not being reached. Okay. Social justice was looking at it a little different. We said, okay, within this, there are things outside of the healthcare system per se, upstream factors, downstream factors that are important, and we have to address those. And when we get to issues, say, of access. And then third, for anti-racism, it sort of has two components. In what way has race been misused traditionally in medicine and medical education? And in what respects has it been underused? And I say race now not as a biological thing, but as a social thing. Where have those racial factors not been taken into account enough? So we put those all together that we can help students grapple with those things. We're really on the way.
All those are excellent responses, with not only the kind of literature that's helped to influence the thread that was developed, but also the methodological approaches that have been undertaken. So for the things that are novel, I know that there may not be a model from which you drew those components. However, for the things that you did model after existing programs that you found, would you like to share any of that as we go into the methodology?
I can take that, and I think I'm actually going to reference Nina here. Nina and I had a few conversations before, and I know she's a strong believer in storytelling, and that's something that appealed to me very well. And so for me, this was the foundation for this series, right? Hearing stories and having people tell their stories from their perspective, and listening in. And so I'm going to pivot to Nina to just, kind of give us a little bit of how that storytelling component comes in, and then maybe we can talk about how we actually structure that whole process.
Sure, thanks. I'm so privileged to be part of this experience. And I did something a little similar a couple of years ago. We invited a panel of people who identified as being part of the LGBT community. And so they came in and they did a noon conference, and we had a panel, and they were able to share their stories with our residents. And I see how some of those elements also came about in this project as well. So just giving people a chance, a safe space to go ahead and share their stories and their experiences. And it left us with an opportunity to sit back and listen and absorb what was going on, so that we can have a fuller perspective of what's going on for our patients and really understand how just grow our perspectives and also meet the patients where they are. So anything else you'd like me to throw in there?
Michelle, would you like to add, please?
Yeah, I kind of would like to add, it gave this, with the storytelling component, it gave an opportunity for our community members to really feel comfortable in sharing their stories. It wasn't scripted, so they didn't have to, fit their experience into, our, our way of doing things as a medical community. They were able to be authentic and come in and just literally share their story on, a subject matter, on how they were experiencing or how they have experienced accessing healthcare. So I really like that we incorporated that component. And I know that it made a lot of our community members excited to be a part of this. They felt like it was really innovative because they were able to be the educators, when I approached them and said, hey, would you like to be a part of it? Would you like to partner with us and join in on these conversations? They were absolutely thrilled because they had never been given the opportunity to come in and not only be able to share their stories, but be, flip the script, and be the educators and share, these are the things that we would like to see, or these are the experiences that we would like to have engaging our providers moving forward. So
So I'd love to do this right now. I'd love to couch what each of you said so eloquently into the methodology. I'm a methodologist. Many folks who know me, I'm the data guy. So I'm a quantitative methodologist. But as you hear, this thread is largely influenced by qualitative methodology. Truth be told, it's also kind of leaning toward community-based participatory research, wherein the community is at the forefront, at the center. And as you could hear both Michelle and Nina kind of highlight, the community is involved in structuring what we're doing in the session. So let's get into the sessions, because that's the crux of this, right? So in your methodology, please break down for us, your audience, what we were doing. So what day of the week we did this, how frequently in the month we did this, how much time we spent. You were starting to get into that, but let's flow through the methodology now to give our audience a really good sense of what was done.
May I take this, team? I'll start and then please chip in. So when Dr. Cortez and I started planning this, well, first of all, we realized the two of us, there was no way we could do this alone. So we brought this team together and we listened. And based on what we listened to, again, the timing had to be around our community members' timing. It wasn't about us, it was about them. And so we chose a weekend morning once a month. And we were very intentional with the time that we chose. So it was at 10 a.m. You know, you sleep in, you wake up, soccer practice, whatever, so that our community members could participate. So that was number one. And once that was done, we had to think about how do we actually invite people to join, right? We needed a space where we could introduce this to the community and also invite people who were interested in, you know, continually joining and presenting their stories. So we came up with an invite of some sort that we sent out to our community members. And this is where Michelle was very pivotal in helping us out, you know, putting that on the Center for Healthy Communities website, social media, getting emails out, word of mouth, that actually helped bring people in. The other thing that we did was once we had sent the invites out, we also needed to create space where we would actually explain what we were doing in detail to our community members. And so our very first session, that's what we did, explaining what it is that we were doing. Why were we using storytelling? We talk about empathy, you know, just so our community members would understand. The other thing that, and again, this is where Dr. Cortez comes in, because I'm sitting here, oh, let's listen to stories. Thinking, well, you just can't go there and say, tell me your story. There has to be some form of guidance, right? You start off somewhere, but then you leave them to continue the story and tell it as they want. And so I'm going to leave Dr. Cortez to tell us how we developed the questions that served as a guide once we began this process of storytelling.
Yeah, well, it's everything we try to do, the husband and I try to do, is keep our eyes on the prize, which are health equity, social justice, and anti-racism. And we could get stories that really didn't move us forward. So we wanted to make certain those stories moved us forward in those things. And so we developed a set of questions, or we began to develop a set of questions to get at those, and say, okay, we want to get these stories that help us toward these three goals. But I think one of the interesting things about it, Kendrick, was that we started out by laying out the questions for the students. Said, okay, here are the questions to ask. And about mid-course, we said, no. We want, and it wasn't very spontaneous because the students just read the questions, people answered. As we turned over control to the students and said, here are some questions we use, you develop it from here. And so they began to look at to take a leadership role in bringing the stories out, which is, I think, also part of the role modeling for the people sitting in the audience, the students in the audience and the faculty in the audience, saying, here's a way to relate to patients. So it served lots of purposes. It was storytelling with a purpose.
So watch this. You guys are doing a phenomenal job. I'm going to reach specifically out to Hannah, Michelle, and Nina. So let's say it's Saturday. Can you take us through how, this is methodologically speaking specifically, how was a session structured? So who played what roles? Because you can kind of hear, like, we have this clinician who's brilliant, who understands how much health equity social justice and anti-racism play into patient care. You've got this expert in social and behavioral sciences who's coming in and understanding how social and structural determinants of health influence things, with another expert from community health coming in, and Michelle and having that added lens of connecting directly to the community. Then you've got the behavioral scientist in Nina understanding how social and behavioral sciences influence health. So you've got this diverse team, and you can see what I'm pointing out now. And then you've got the medical student who's an expert and a student leader. But now for a session to unfold with these great experts playing these different roles, what is a session structured like? So when you have each session, you have these great themes that you can share about, right? But ultimately, how does the session open? So what happens at the very beginning, methodologically speaking? Who's leading that effort? What do we do for the first half of the session? Do we do breakout sessions? If we do, how do we go into that? So let's talk to that real quick, where the audience gets a sense of, if they wanted to do what we've done, how would they do it?
I'd like to start with Dr. Erosay did an excellent job at establishing ground rules. And that set the stage actually for our community members to really feel comfortable and realize it was a safe space for them to come in, be authentic, share their stories, and with no judgment. Everybody that was participating knew that, okay, we are going to lead with empathy, right? We're going to listen
Now
and
watch.
be attentive. Okay.
So how did they get the ground rules? Because this is part of the method. So did you email them the ground rules at the very beginning? Did we take 5 minutes and share the ground rules? Please share that. Expand on it.
Yes, at the very beginning, the ground rules were shared. So everybody knew there was a common understanding as to, we are here. We are here to listen. We're here to learn. And we're here to lead our comments. Any comments that we have, they're non-judgmental. We're going to lead with empathy. And we're really going to try to gain understanding of everybody's experiences and learn from them. So I really appreciated that we started out the sessions with setting the stage, creating a safe space for people really to be able to be open to the experiences that they were about to enter into.
And my energy is high, so please forgive me for being so excited. I love this stuff. But so when we did this, every session you're saying opened up with ground rules. And if my memory serves me correctly, because I think I was in each session, was it the case that there was also kind of a calming, maybe even someone played music that was calm to kind of accompany the keeping people comfortable? And so there's this whole facilitating of an environment, a culture, even on Zoom. So now, once we actually established the ground rules and people heard the calming music as they came into the Zoom space, what was the first thing that happened? Did you guys introduce the theme of the day? And then did someone talk about it? How did that go? What happened?
At first, I think Audrey and I took up too much of the space, and we gave sort of overlong introduction. But by about the third session, right, Audrey, we had moved out of it, and I think you did most of it. You introduced yourself, you introduced me, and whammo, it went out to the students, so they would be in control of the whole thing. And that it was a very quick transition. Probably was down to about 30 seconds at that point, and then they took over.
The way that I saw it was that the two of you were modeling, and you were setting the tone for the series. So I really appreciated what you offered. And then as we got farther into the season, the way that I remember it is that 2 med school students were taking it over and modeling some of that, and then leading into the introductions, and then kind of showcasing the whole thing. So I think the 2 of you did a beautiful job modeling, how to set the tone and how to kind of hold the space too. So I think the 2 of you did a beautiful job.
So I want to jump in here because I want to do this, and I think everyone's light bulb will pop back on. So one of the things that I remember very distinctly is us having conversations about ensuring that we set the right tone. And Michelle is highlighting that exceptionally well. Nina's backing that up very well. Dr. Cortez, you're doing a phenomenal job. But watch what I'm going to say, because I remember this conversation I had with you guys where once you realized that the students needed to be more of the lead, and once you guys introduced the sessions each week, then the students would do their thing. There was this other piece where you asked me to come in and remind the audience and everyone involved what our objectives were, especially because we're dealing with very touchy subjects. And I think methodologically speaking, that was something that's very pivotal about how we approach this, because as you've each mentioned very well, the community was at the center, and our student learners, right? Those were the 2 learners we're really trying to facilitate learning for. And we kept, as we augmented things. So there's this process called rapid cycle quality improvement. And even though it can be a very formal data-driven process, description is still data. You guys discussed things. You saw what was going on and made modifications rapidly to improve the quality of your effort each Saturday. So what ended up occurring to my knowledge was once we got into students playing a major league and the community being at the forefront and me just sharing, okay, hey, here are the objectives for today to ensure that that music facilitation and that cultural facilitation of we're here for you, we want to hear what you've got to say, and this is an open forum. Then something happened really magical. Hannah, do you remember how the session flowed once you guys took over as students and what was our major component as we went into our sessions, methodologically speaking? What did we do?
So with the sessions, as was mentioned, we had a very brief introduction, and then it was really given over to us to facilitate a discussion. And I just want to take us back a little bit because as the students, we were really given the autonomy to formulate the questions, and we were given the information of the community members so we can kind of tailor the questions to the topic that we were discussing that day. So once we, formulated roughly about 3 questions for our community members, then we would have an open discussion where we would pose the question and then give the community members space to answer those questions. And once we, allowed them enough space to tell us their stories, then we moved into a post-panel self-reflection portion of the talk where we went into breakout sessions. We allowed small groups to discuss what they just heard, and then we would come back together to have an open discussion for the entire group.
You guys brought that full circle. So in terms of talking about how we did everything, there was a patient or community-centered and student-centered approach. The way in which things were facilitated in the sessions, which I roughly remember about an hour and a half, was an introduction where there was a clear ground rules to lay this very safe environment foundation with music accompanying it. Then the co-leads would introduce the topic, have the students take over. The students would introduce what the theme was for the day, the objectives, then introduce the community members. Then they'd start to ask the community questions in a whole forum where we were all in the same Zoom space. Then the final half an hour or so, we go into breakout rooms with more focused questions where the students still led those efforts. And then several of us were dispersed into rooms to help facilitate the dialogue. And so ultimately, I know that the last thing that we would do is come back into the full session and have kind of like reflections. And so for what we've done thus far, because it was so qualitatively based and that we're still early on in this endeavor, there's data forthcoming. However, reflections are where we need to go, not only with discussing what we've done in terms of the sessions themselves, but with this overall program. And so I want to invite us to now reflect on what we've learned from what we've done thus far, because I think the way that Hannah did things will leave open the example of how we structured sessions for the other recordings that we're doing. So let's talk about reflections. We can talk about what we've learned, how the reflections ended each session, any limitations and future directions, but let's do that now.
The impact of the session had on me the effect of providing hope for the possibility of more attentive compassion and care towards communities of color when it deals with the pandemic and all the other things that affect our communities in greater proportions than other communities. It gave me hope that the future healthcare professionals are interested in how we feel, on how we feel about the care that we've been receiving over not only this specific period, but periods before. And the session provided an opportunity for me to express how I feel without feeling any kind of threat or possibility of having negative care towards me specifically as a patient. It allowed me the ability to say what I felt without fear that I would not receive quality care or quality attention in the times where I may need it most. That's how the sessions had provided me that space to express myself freely.
Thank you, Pastor Settle.
All right.
So before I go into my part of the reflections, I just wanted to add a little bit to, the structure, right? Um, at the very, very first session before, our community members actually came in and started sharing stories, we made it very clear why we were doing this and what we were hoping that our participants would learn. And so we in the School of Medicine, we call them learning outcomes, right? And so um, for Dr. Cortez and myself, in charge of this curricular thread, it was very important that students were not just showing up and, we don't even know why we're here, or community members were not just showing up and feeling like, they were being sampled for whatever. There was a real intention and what's the word? And thought behind this. And so our goal or our hope was that by the end of the series that students would be able to describe the role of racism, ethnicity, language, facilities, sexual orientation, disabilities and differential abilities, gender identity in health disparities. That's what we're hoping for. The other one was that they would be able to identify opportunities to incorporate all these complex intersectionalities of their patients and community members when they were delivering healthcare to them. And especially for our student leaders and our participants as well, to be able to practice compassionate curiosity and empathy when, interacting with people. And I think for Dr. Cortez and myself, the big thing was, being able to commit to anti-racist actions in healthcare. So it's not enough to just come listen, but what are you going to do about this? How are you going to apply this, going forward? And so that was the intention that we set forth before all of this started. And so I say this because now I look back when you ask about reflections, and I know that speaking from a curricular point, and everybody's going to, but speaking for myself, it gave me so much information about how I needed to design this thread, this curriculum for the students. Our community members, there were sessions where you were, wait, what? This, I've never thought about it this way. That totally flew over my head. And so for me, it brought in a lot of curricular benefits for me as a thread director. And I will talk later about how I incorporated this into, what we ended up building for the School of Medicine. But I will, create space for everybody else to share some reflections before I get there.
You've done such a great job. Dr. Cortez, would you like to at least talk about from community conversations what you feel like we accomplished in such a short amount of time in your reflections?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you one thing that really struck me. Once Audra and I got out of the way and didn't occupy too much space in the beginning, and students took over, they role modeled so well what we wanted, which was compassionate listening. And if I use it, I put it another way, they reduced hierarchy. They didn't get rid of hierarchy because there always is hierarchy, but they reduced it. And one of the ways they did it in the earlier sessions, they'd ask the question, then they go on to the next question, which we had written out. Once we turned it over to the students, they showed listening by follow-up questions, which they weren't doing in the first couple of sessions. And pretty soon, by the end of our community conversations, they were really role modeling conversations, not asking questions and listening to outsiders. So that was terrific. And it was not just for the students in the audience, I'll say the audience, those who came to the session, but there were faculty, there were staff, there were some community members who were in the audience. And so it role modeled for a lot of people that we can build relationships in our work, not just tend to patients. So I want to credit the students for role modeling that so well.
Michelle, Nina, would you please jump in here, because I can already hear, in terms of our reflections, Dr. Osei and Dr. Cortez have done such a great job of setting this up beautifully. Can you talk to the benefits that you saw to the constituents, right? So share benefits that you saw to staff, to community members, and to students, and then if you'd like to ourselves, but please touch on other benefits you saw in your reflections from what we've done thus far.
Definitely. I think the breakout sessions were pivotal. the students really took that opportunity, at least the breakout sessions that I was in, to really think about how they could have responded differently if they were the providers in in those experiences that the community members shared. They really talked about, wow, I probably would have said or done the same thing. Let me take a step back as I'm growing and learning my profession, how I could do things better and allow my future patients to have a different experience. So I thought that was great that we incorporated that. I don't think it was, by happenstance. And I appreciate that we did that. I think that was very beneficial. And also for me as well, just learning and hearing, just little simple things that you can say, asking people, how would you like to be addressed? And not making an assumption by what I see, presented in front of me. And also, I think that I want to say one thing that we could do better, disseminating the information back out into the community. That's one thing that we need to work on. And I think that's just across the board everywhere. We need to, when we invite the community to participate in things, we need to also figure out how can we share this information back out with them, because it's a learning circle, right? We all want to benefit from this experience. And so those that weren't able to participate, it would be nice if we had this where it could be it could have been recorded and posted on our website so that other community members could have shared in the experience as well.
Thank you. Nina, would you like to add anything?
Sure, I think those are great points. I had to look up some acronyms. So, the AAMC, so the Association of American Medical Colleges, and ACGME, the Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education, they both encourage self-reflection. And I don't think there are always instances in medical education where students, residents, fellows get to self-reflect. So I thought this gave them a beautiful opportunity to listen to a story, really take it in, absorb it, and listen, think about process it, share in a small intimate group where they can be vulnerable with each other, think about how they're going to apply this information, and then share with the group so we can learn together. So I thought that was a very unique experience, a beautiful experience, and I'm glad we got to create a safe and special place for that. If anything, I would think, another way to maybe kind of challenge our audience next time would be to encourage them to have their cameras off. I think we're all busy individuals. We're all in different spaces. So I see, especially when we're having difficult conversations, it might feel safer to have our camera off. However, if we turn on our camera, it really challenges us to be present, to think about these things, to take them in. And if we react, because we're human and sometimes that happens, hopefully we're more mindful and thoughtful about that so we can react in a safe space rather than in front of our patient. So I would definitely kind of encourage that for maybe next time around. But I thought it was a beautiful experience, even just to watch how the whole thing evolved. So here I am, like in the earlier sessions, and when we would go into breakout rooms, if I was paired up with another student who was trained to facilitate these spaces, you would see them kind of take control of the session and grow with it and have fun with it and be more exciting as the time went on. So it was beautiful and wonderful to see them get more leadership experience and make the most out of that experience for themselves too. So.
Oh, this is excellent.
I'm sorry, I want to interject. I also wanted to share in the breakout sessions that a lot of the students shared that not only do we create a safe space for our community members, but also for them. I remember vividly a couple of the students in different sessions stated that they would not have been so comfortable to be vulnerable if this was in a class setting and they were asked to provide their real thoughts or feelings about, how the conversations impacted them personally. They would not have shared. They would have not been willing to be vulnerable. But they said that we created such a safe space that they did feel comfortable sharing their real thoughts and opinions about, how what they heard from the community member impacted them and what they would do differently, right, to hopefully create a better experience for their future patients.
I feel like we're playing volleyball right now. That was like a dig, a lob, and now it's going to be a spike to Hannah, because literally you touched on what the benefits were to the students. And I literally wanted to ask Hannah from her direct experience what she'd like to share as well, because we've already gotten into now benefits, right? And several of you have been talking about, instead of limitations, we can call them quality improvements and future directions. And so we're starting to touch on that. But before we delve finally into that and conclude, I wanted to ensure that we gave Hannah the opportunity to also, from a direct student standpoint, to share as well, because you did a heck of a job, Michelle.
Yes, thank you. So speaking for myself and many students, I believe here at UCR School of Medicine, I could say that we primarily chose this school because it's committed to the community. So having these community conversation sessions really allowed me to listen to honest feedback from community members outside of a clinic setting. And I thought that was really important. Just like, Michelle mentioned, we feel a little apprehensive to say things in class. I kind of felt the same way about patients in a clinic. They, are kind of guarded. And as a student in a clinic, I'm kind of that third party that's witnessing the patient and the doctor. And that is something that I sensed. But in these conversations, that, was not the case. We created this space that was really safe for them to say what they needed to say. And that was important for me to get to hear and to take that with me, for my future practice. In addition, the sessions allowed me to take on a leadership role where I was able to interview community members, contribute to then disseminating the information that we learned to the rest of our UCR community. And I was also able to have some input into molding the future of this program. So I really can't emphasize just how empowering this program was for me as a student, because like I said, not only do I get to stay true to my motivation of what brought me to UCR in the first place, which is, eventually serving my community, but I also got to feel heard as a student and given the opportunity to be a leader in this program. So
Thank you.
That was my experience. Yeah.
Oh, and that's wonderful. So as everyone is aware, medical schools are both governed and structured by not only our missions, but governing bodies. And so Nita did a phenomenal job of appealing to the Association for American Medical Colleges and the Association for the Council of Graduate Medical Education, AAMC and ACGME. So the reason why I'm setting this up and framing it this way at the conclusion is because I've heard the term thread be used the entire time. And if I weren't in a medical school, having an understanding of what a thread meant would be difficult for me. But I know that there's the core curriculum that we identify and offer to try to satisfy the areas that accrediting bodies say we must meet. But we also have these threads trying to do the same thing. And they're usually, like you guys have, and we have this content that's interwoven throughout courses across years. So that's what our thread is. But that in itself represents, we could call it a limitation, a challenge, a way in which we have to embark upon quality improvement and then guide future directions of our efforts. And so I wanted to frame it that way to allow us to then in our conclusions talk about what we see ourselves doing with this amazing thread, because clearly I know every Saturday I showed up as busy as we are. I would show up and literally it was better than coffee. Like I'm from the community. I saw community members talk about how transformed they were, that no doctor, no medical school had ever asked them to share their story. I heard medical students talk about how, on the one hand, just like Hannah's doing, it transformed them. But like Dr. Osei and Dr. Cortez did, they made sure the students were leading it. So they were at the forefront of engagement and interaction with the community. And so ultimately, it's highly impactful, but it's challenged by a curricular structure that has it be a thread. So in terms of future directions and any other things that you'd like to share in this conclusion, please enlighten this audience.
Let me jump in. You're inspiring me. We walked away from, Adjo and I walked away from these conversations with a number of things that we brought into the HESJAR threads completely. Just to give three very briefly. We established a thing called the interpersonal triad, which is a way of looking at conversations. And we said, the triad was understanding, which is obvious, that's cultural competence, communication, and advocacy. And so Adjo said, well, we really got to get that advocacy piece in there so that students see themselves not just as treaters of patients, but as advocates for patients. And we're building that into the curriculum as we do HESJAR. And in our first meeting with class 2 weeks ago, I started it out by addressing the class and saying, the term had been used here a lot. Our class will be a safe space for unsafe ideas. So the idea is open yourself up, because the students kind of open themselves up to ideas coming in from the community, and they relinquish control in that. And that was fabulous. Yeah. And the third thing we've done, taken from these conversations, is we're turning our modules into conversations. We did a breakout in our first session, first module for the first year students, and we didn't have moderators. We had students by randomly selected moderators in there. They took over and did a fabulous job. So we found, and when they came back from those breakout sessions, the comments we heard in the follow-up was, we wish we had more time for students to get there and really talk about the health equity, social justice, and anti-racism issues we raised in the opening of the module session. So a tremendous amount from these conversations worked its way into what we're doing now.
I'm going to add on to what Dr. Cortez has said. Speaking as someone who was in charge of building something that was non-existent into the 4-year cycle of medical education, these conversations were I don't know what the word I'm looking for. They were monumental in helping us structure how this was going to go. So Dr. Cortez has talked about the interpersonal triad. Now, Dr. Cortez did a beautiful job of stepping back, looking at everything that we had gotten so far, listening to what our community members have talked about, and our students, and our faculty too, because remember, we had faculty present at some of these, all right? One of the things that kept coming up was, oh man, we know we can all do a better job, but where is the time? Nobody has time to, So Dr. Cortez came up with this brilliant idea, which we now call the Health Equity Framework, which is where we're now training all our faculty members to ask one fundamental question in the interaction with students and with patients. And the question is, in this case or situation, in this clinical case or medical education situation, are there any structural, cultural, or systemic factors that could facilitate or complicate the pursuit of health equity, right? That's the foundational question, right? Now, if our faculty members want to take it a step further, then we kind of break it down, right? Are there any intersectional factors that are contributing to this, right? Are there any situational or personal factors that are contributing to this? Are there any race-related factors that are contributing to this? So through these conversations, we have been able to come up with this framework that we're now using across our medical school for our faculty members. And our students get to experience this in their 3rd year. We actually have them go through this workshop that we're providing for our faculty as well, because as they begin their clinical experiences, right, life happens. And you want to be able to take a few moments there and say, hey, are there any structural, systemic, cultural things that could be thrown into this mix to explain what I'm seeing with my patients? So we are doing that. And so now we have 3 main components in our thread: interpersonal triad, the health equity framework, and then the third one is the systems, culture, and structural approach to looking at disparities. And we typically start with the SCS in the first year, and then in the second year, we focus on interpersonal triad, and we've added trauma-informed care, right? Because as we listen to these stories, I think especially on the section of mental health care, so many things came up that, a lot of the times it goes over our heads in the healthcare world. And then in the 3rd and 4th years, we're focusing on the health equity framework. So from a curricular standpoint, these conversations really give us the groundwork for how we designed, which is what we set out to do in the first place. Tell us how you want this to go so that we can design something that serves you and serves our students as well. So it's worked out well so far.
This has been excellent. So what I want to ensure is that as we wrap up, if there are any closing remarks anyone would like to make before I do anything like that, please feel free to do so. You know how I am. I'll take y'all's silence to mean that it's time to wrap this up. So I think this has been highly impactful. The only other future direction that I'd love to advance is that there has been the most amazing concerted effort by the leadership to reach out to the Office of Assessment and Evaluation to provide more ways of collecting data and analyzing the impact that this course has on our students and then, of course, on our community. I would like to say, as the Associate Dean of that office and as a member of this amazing team, that there have been really progressive efforts to ensure that we both identify where, like the thread, we already have threaded items on evaluations and within courses where we're starting to get at that for the first time. And as we move forward, adding more ways of collecting data, even qualitative, rich, thick descriptions that really capture the impact of this program. I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank the audiences for tuning in. This is an amazing program. I thank this HESJAR team again. All of you have been phenomenal.